Welcome to Formula One and Son. I'm Tom.
And I'm Oscar.
Well, Oscar, after an Australian Grand Prix that was certainly more interesting than last year's, but still not super exciting, what a Bahrain Grand Prix we had. An amazingly fun race.
Yeah.
Action everywhere. How do you want to tackle this? Should we just briefly touch on qualifying? A few things probably to call out.
Yeah. Qualifying, Ferraris were showing pace again, finally. And with the rookie driver of Leclerc coming out on pole, it certainly made for Leclerc fans to be happy. After a disappointing race for him, though.
Yeah, I think in every qualifying session, Q1, Q2, Q3, Leclerc had about 3/10 on Vettel and remained that way. Just seemed dominant all through practice, all through quali, didn't he?
Yeah, wasn't Vettel saying his car had a problem at some point?
You've said this to me before, but I don't believe so.
I think he did.
Yeah, we know. We'll obviously talk about Leclerc's problem, which happened, but no, I don't know. I don't think Vettel had a particular problem. Hamilton and Bottas then. I wondered if we were going to see a bit of a return to Bottas playing the rear gunner.
Yeah.
Wingman, as Toto called him. But, he did okay. He was quite close to Hamilton in qualifying, actually.
Yeah.
I think in Q3 he was only less than half a tenth off him.
Yeah.
I think Bottas is right up there. Yeah. And then, of course, Max Verstappen was in fifth, and you kind of expect, 1-2 Ferrari, 3-4. It's great to see the Ferraris found that speed that they'd lost from practice.
Yeah.
And then in the Australian Grand Prix, they were nowhere.
But as people were saying, were they hiding this problem for the Bahrain Grand Prix?
No, you don't sandbag. Why would you deliberately be slow in Australia and give up points just so you can go, surprise?
Yeah,
I don't think so. But what was surprising about Verstappen is he beat Magnussen to P5 only by 5,000th of a second. Magnussen almost pipped Verstappen, and we'll talk about the race, but you've got to wonder where Red Bull's pace was. And I think, where was Gasly? He didn't even make it through to Q3, right?
He did better than he did in Australia, though.
But Gasly's kind of nowhere. Further down the field, the Hasses in quali seemed strong again. You had Magnussen, but then Sainz. And look, I've got to tell you, one of the things I'm loving so far about this season, and as we review the race, I want to talk a little more about this, but the McLarens, Fernando was there. We know since then, because we're recording this podcast a week after the race, Fernando tested the McLaren in the testing that happened in Bahrain during the week, and he said it's a big step, but not enough to tempt him back into Formula One.
Really?
Yeah. He's focused on his IndyCar attack, which is only next month, I think, in May.
Yeah, but when he finishes that, do you reckon if the McLarens get even stronger, because the Renault engine's looking good this year, do you reckon he might be tempted to come back into F1 and pull a Michael Schumacher?
Hopefully more successfully than Schumacher did it, right?
Yeah.
I think if the car what did he say? He said something like, if the car could be winning races, he'd be tempted, and he doesn't think it's there, which is probably fair enough. They've obviously taken a big step, miles away still from Ferrari and Mercedes. I wouldn't say miles away from Red Bull, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, their pace was gone for like 3 years or so, wasn't they?
Oh, even longer, right? Those Honda years, they had 3 or 4 years. It's kind of been
but
gone for 4
before
or 5
that,
years.
they were like winning races, as you probably know if you're listening to this podcast. They were winning races, and I think they have the potential to do that again. And if Fernando Alonso goes back on the team, with the potential Sainz and Norris is showing, he could definitely win races at the moment.
Oh, what, in the current
car? With a bit of luck, maybe.
He might snatch a podium once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
Certainly more likely to do that than in previous years. Further down the field, the McLarens look good, the Hasses look good, and then really probably the Renaults. But I think, I was pretty happy when Ricciardo out-qualified Hülkenberg.
Hülkenberg did say he had a problem, though.
Yeah, there was some issue with Hülkenberg, but Ricciardo genuinely looked like he was a bit back on the pace this weekend. And he was, only a couple of tenths off Norris for that P10, but of course, being in P11 gave him that free choice of tyre, and we've seen Ricciardo talking about he's still not right there with the car, and as we talk about the race, that was obvious in a few things.
Yeah, so moving further down the field, we have the Toro Rosso of Albon out-qualifying Gasly, and the Toro Rossos are showing a tremendous amount of pace over last year.
Yeah, they certainly are. They certainly are. No, it's good. Yeah, I know. When Albon in the junior team's out-qualifying the senior team. And Albon, the rookie, out-qualifying Kvyat as well.
Yeah.
So continuing his good form.
But Kvyat wasn't very far behind.
Yeah, and the Force Indias were kind of nowhere through quali.
Yeah, Force Indias have been really slow over the last...
Stroll didn't even make it out of Q1. Perez did, but didn't have a lot of pace.
It's almost like the racing points and the Toro Rosso was just switched positions.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned the Alphas. Raikkonen got through to Q3 and was up there in P9, but Giovinazzi way down in P16.
Yeah, but he's a rookie. He still needs to get acclimatized with Formula
but
1.
Raikkonen, the Alphas are a funny team so far this year. I know it's only 2 races, but I've kind of seen them up there, but they seem a bit anonymous for some reason.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get into that in the race. And then, of course, the Williams.
Yeah.
Ooh, what do you say about
But there
Williams?
was a bit of a battle between Russell and Kubica, which I guess is pretty good.
Yeah, they qualified within half a tenth of each other, I think, for hundredths of each other. And look, and they were faster than in Australia, but that could be because in Bahrain it's more of a power circuit.
And as you may have seen on the news, they said they had found a fundamental issue with the car and that over time they will fix it.
Yeah, but they didn't know how soon they would fix it, did they? They were kind of like, well, we'll fix it, but one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was qualifying, kind of interesting. Always a spectacle as well under the lights. And then the race, man, oh man.
That was a great race.
And probably the first 10 or so laps of that race, there was stuff going on everywhere. And I must admit, after the race, and we talked a little bit about F1 TV before. I watched the first 10 laps of the race from multiple points of view from different cars.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that I wasn't sure why things happen the way they happen. Hulkenberg, blistering start.
Yeah.
Blistering start.
Yeah.
Because where did he start? He was way back down in 17th, right?
Yeah.
And then by lap 7 or 8, he was up in P8 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was P8, right?
Yeah. But look, so the obvious talking point of the race, Leclerc had a shocker of a start. Or not a shocker, just pretty ordinary.
Yeah. Like, I think Vettel overtook him on that start. And
yeah, Vettel got the better start.
Both of the Mercedes were having a look at him.
Yeah. Well, I think he was getting threatened by... Did Bottas get him? So Vettel got him. Did Bottas
I think Bottas got him, but
Leclerc... Or did
Leclerc.
Hamilton get him?
I think it was Bottas. Hamilton got a pretty bad start, I think.
He was getting threatened. And look, and I guess I was expecting one of those kind of rookie races where he muffed it from the start and then he just wilts and fades away. But he clearly was struggling for grip in those first laps or two.
But once his tyres turned on, he was fast.
He was on fire, man. He was on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, he quickly caught up to Seb. And then, interestingly, so in Australia what happened, he said, what should I do? This admittedly was towards the end of the race in Australia.
Yeah.
And they said, no, just stay behind Seb. This time, he makes a call, and I rewatched this from Leclerc's car to hear the team radio.
Yeah.
And he says, hey guys, I'm faster than him. The typical let me go. And a long time goes, pause. And eventually they just come back on and say, okay. Like they don't say hold station, they don't say overtake him, they just say, okay.
Yeah, they just seem to let him race.
Yeah, I think they just said, it's up to you, buddy. And look, I'm glad he then decided I'm going to take the race to Seb. To be fair, Leclerc had the pace all weekend and Seb was kind of nowhere.
Yeah.
But then, so in those opening laps, right at the beginning, Hulkenberg gets this great start. Leclerc slips back a little bit.
Ricciardo also gets a great start.
Ricciardo had a pretty decent start.
Yeah, he moved from 11th to 6th in the starting laps.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
So some of that in the starting laps, but right off the beginning he did okay. He wasn't 11th because there was some grid penalties for Grosjean.
Oh, he was 10th,
so he ended up starting
wasn't
10th, I think, yeah. He had a pretty good start, but it was interesting. Lando Norris, I want to talk about this because I'm going to be a little excited and probably prematurely, and who knows what's going to happen for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
2 things stood out for me, and maybe it's just one thing. Both the Renault-powered teams showed a hell of a lot of pace.
Yeah.
At the beginning, Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. Sainz was going great guns. We saw Sainz was attacking Vettel. Not Vettel. Who's the other guy? Verstappen. So Sainz was attacking Verstappen on merit. And Verstappen had no answer for it. But they get to turn 4. And, of course, turn 4 was a key talking point in this race, largely because they had introduced that extra DRS zone down that straight after turn 3. And so coming into turn 4, Sainz, I can't remember if he had DRS or not, but gets a huge run on Verstappen, comes around the outside of him and is miles past him, like easily a car length past him. And then he turns into turn 4 trying to take the racing line. But if you then watch it from Verstappen's point of view, Verstappen just outbroke Sainz. So he was much later on the brakes. So he actually comes up in next to Sainz. I don't think Sainz knows that Verstappen has gotten there. I think he's, in Sainz's mind, he's like, I've got the move done. Turns in, Verstappen's there, and that's when they make contact, and we saw all those sparks flying.
So what are you thinking? That Renault straight line speed, great power unit, Red Bull, great aero braking, as always, though.
Well, yeah, look, I'm not sure about the Red Bull. People have been saying the Honda, it's huge, it's made huge steps. I think you're hearing Toto Wolff was saying, it's made huge steps. Sure, and I think it has. It had a lot of steps it needed to make. But there's a few examples through this race. So that was one of them. You saw Sainz easily threatening Verstappen, and then he got that contact, broke his wing or something, and had to pit. Then that was largely all we heard from Sainz. He didn't finish in the end, and maybe from the damage from that contact. But then we watched Lando Norris. He came best of the rest, right, in this race. He came 6th. Phenomenal. He had a really good start, and you're thinking, where's he going to go? And then he dropped back, and everyone went, Norris had a bad start. He lost 4 positions off the start. Actually, if you rewatch it, and they never showed it on the world feed, but if you rewatch it from his point of view, you see that he gets a bit of contact really early on.
With Ricciardo, right?
Yeah, well, it's hard to tell at first. He just gets contact, and he comes off the track and has to go through a little bit of gravel, and it really slows him down.
I'm sure from the world feed, you probably saw a McLaren going across and kicking up some
you
dust.
Picked that up at the time.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. But then if you watch from Ricciardo's POV, then you see that, Norris is kind of coming in. And it wasn't Ricciardo's fault, but their wheels touch, and that's what pushes Norris off.
Yeah.
And so then he had to do this recovery drive. But again, massive pace. He was just overtaking everyone. What really surprised me, though, and we didn't see a lot of this at the time, the story of Daniel Ricciardo's race, heartbreaking as it was, because double DNF for the Renaults. That's another heartbreak for Ricciardo. But ignore the heartbreak for a moment, and the same can be said of Leclerc. Ignore the heartbreak of his later mechanical issues, and he lost his first. The speed for the Renaults was really good. So, I was watching Ricciardo's first 10 or so laps. You could see Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen was attacking Magnussen. And so you had the Alpha on the Haas. Really exciting stuff. They were racing, but Räikkönen couldn't get past the Haas.
Yeah.
But then Ricciardo starts to put pressure on Kimi Räikkönen and does this great move into that tricky turn 10 where they have to do that kind of almost a hairpin turn with that DRS zone where they're kind of coming off camber and it's really tricky. And so Ricciardo puts a lot of pressure on Räikkönen through there. Sure enough, Räikkönen runs deep into turn 10 and Ricciardo gets him. But then what's impressive is then Ricciardo catches Magnussen like that, like really quite quickly and overtakes Magnussen.
And those are the Ferrari engines too, right?
That's right. And this is early in the race.
So I'm thinking there could be a great battle between the engine in the midfield pack, the engine manufacturers. So I think that Renault and McLaren will have a great battle for the Constructors' Championship. And Haas and Alpha will both be in that battle. But whether they're in the same battle or separate battles, I don't know yet. And something else I know from watching the race. The first thing is that anybody who DNF'd in Australia went on to DNF in Bahrain too.
Really?
Yeah.
So who was that in Australia? Like Sainz?
It was Sainz, Magnussen, and Ricciardo.
Oh, Sainz, Magnussen.
Sainz, Grosjean, and Ricciardo.
Yeah, that's right.
And Sainz, Grosjean, and Ricciardo DNF'd in Bahrain too.
What was Grosjean's issue in this race?
I think he got he had contact.
He had
with somebody.
that contact on lap 1, didn't he?
I think it was that massive. Sainz.
Yeah, wasn't it a Force India?
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I should say a Racing Point. That's bad of us, Racing Point. So yeah, that's right. So really unlucky for Grosjean. But look, for Ricciardo, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. He had the pace, but then they put him on the horrible one-stop strategy. Yeah. I've got to say, and I've felt this I don't know. It's easy to be a kind of Monday morning expert, but it was really evident the one-stop strategy wasn't going to work. Those tyres were falling off quickly, and they put Hülkenberg, got the preferential pit stop, even though Ricciardo was in front, went on to the two-stopper, and that was working out great for Hülkenberg. He was probably going to be best of the rest, I think.
I think he was.
7th, around there anyway, right? So strong race. Hülkenberg had that flyer of a start.
Something else about the DNFs in this race. So Ricciardo's team, Red Bull, last year both had a double DNF. This year, Ricciardo's team, another double DNF.
What, in Bahrain?
Yeah, in Bahrain last year, both of the Red Bulls didn't finish.
Well, I was looking at the stats because we know that Daniel Ricciardo had a bad lot of mechanical failures last season. In the last 6 races, so the first 2 races of this season, and the last 4 races of last season, he's had 4 out of the 6 races DNF.
But you can't really say that that's an issue. I know it's not.
Well,
great,
isn't it all
but
Renault
these are
engine
different
related?
teams, and you're going back into 2018 as well. So I feel like that's not really.
No, I know
good,
it's just interesting.
Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense. But Renault engines, right? So Sainz DNF'd in Australia because of the MG UK, I think. And you know what was embarrassing for Renault in Bahrain was it's almost like Hülkenberg's engine obviously flew apart. You saw it go pop.
Yeah, it was a
smoke
really
out
bad
the back.
engine failure.
As Ricciardo drives past, his car breaks down.
Yeah.
And it's almost like someone was in the pits and said, oh, Hülkenberg's car's broken, hit the kill switch, and they hit the wrong one and hit Ricciardo's kill switch and killed his car. Obviously, that's not what happened.
Well, yeah.
But Ricciardo's power just went out. And when they went to the onboard, with the kind of reverse view from Hülkenberg's car, you could see Ricciardo pull it off behind you. Really embarrassing.
Well, what I saw is that I saw Hülkenberg on the grass, and then they cut to an image. I thought it was Hülkenberg again, but it was Ricciardo also on the grass.
Exactly. Now, look, if we can... So, as I said, it was easy to be pretty pessimistic about what occurred there, but from what I saw from the McLarens, from what I saw from the Renaults, both of those teams seem to have serious speed. Now, look, Norris ended up in 6th position, so he's the only one I think that fulfilled his potential. But I think Sainz would have been right up there if not for their contact with Verstappen. And Ricciardo, probably not because of his one-stopper, but certainly Hülkenberg would have been right up there as well. The best of the rest teams would have been McLaren and Renault.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm happy about that in terms of the potential it shows. But, yeah, reliability's a huge issue.
Okay, let's talk about Williams.
Oh,
now,
do we have to?
Yes, we have to. Okay, so as you saw, they were propping up the stands once again.
They finished, though.
They did finish. They both finished.
Yeah.
So they were in, 16th and 17th in the end?
15th and
15th and
yeah.
16th, which isn't that bad.
And Russell was only 1 lap down, which was the same as Kvyat, Magnussen and Stroll.
But Russell and Kubica were having a bit of a scrap at the beginning. And also in qualifying, they said that their laps in qualifying in Bahrain for the 2018 car were faster than the 2019 car.
Really?
Yeah, they said that over the world feed.
That's pretty sad, isn't it? So they've gone backwards. Let's hope they can really develop that car.
They're like nowhere near anyone else.
Let's talk about the other event that was pretty significant, I thought, which was the Hamilton and Vettel battle. So, Vettel, I think, pitted earlier, came out, and Hamilton starts to close in on him and makes that move again at turn 4. Lots of action down at turn 4. And we saw what we've seen so many times last year, that as soon as Vettel gets in these head-to-head battles, and it was with Hamilton last year in Monza, and with Ricciardo at Circuit of the Americas and somewhere else, where he just spins. As soon as he's in this wheel-to-wheel fight, he spins. And no one else spun down at turn 4. I mean, there was all the talk about the wind and, changes behind you. And Hamilton afterwards said, I was looking at the flag and you could see, I knew I could brake late because of the wind, the headwind.
Yeah, but
I don't know. Vettel is clearly under a lot of pressure when it comes to his battles with Hamilton.
Really bad
When's the
spin,
last time he won one?
I don't...
I can't recall.
Neither can I. But that was a really bad spin because as you saw... It was the spin that put his suspension off that eventually ripped off his front wing.
Yeah, that's right. And, Yeah, that was pretty exciting. I think because he had the vibe. I don't think he put his suspension off. I think he flat spotted his tyres.
Oh, yeah.
And the vibration from the flat spotting. There's those spectacular photos because it's nighttime. There's sparks everywhere. And it looks like he's doing a jump through, like he's a stuntman doing a jump through sparks.
Yeah, but at first I thought he had just touched one of the back markers that caught up to him during the spin.
Yeah. No, really, he's under a lot of pressure, particularly... Look, Leclerc was pretty unimpressive in Australia, but in Bahrain, he was imperious. You know, he dominated all the practice sessions. He dominated qualifying. He had that race.
Right.
You know, after a bad start, he showed maturity to bring it back. And then, you know, if not for that mechanical issue... where I understand it was like a fuel injector. It was something really basic.
Yeah.
They're going to run that engine in China, yeah?
The same engine?
Yeah. Yep. So it wasn't a major issue, but he lost a lot lot. And
but
then we saw
if not for that,
Bottas get past him. Fortunately, the Renaults saved him, and you could argue the Renaults yet again stuffed Verstappen.
I was hoping for a safety car, but not that way.
No, that's right. But the safety car, the race finished under the safety car, and that meant Verstappen couldn't overtake Leclerc, which really is justice in a way. Verstappen didn't deserve a podium with his speed. Leclerc certainly did. It's his first podium.
If I was a Formula One driver and I was in that situation, I'm not sure how hard I would actually push to overtake him as for just letting him be on the podium.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Well, you're always going to take the points. Verstappen's a racer.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw, I think when it was Hamilton who passed Leclerc, he kind of waved at him like, sorry, guy. You know, and he was really nice to him after the race. You know, in the cool down room, he's like, hey, you got a lot of future ahead of you. You're going to win a lot. You know, today's hard to take, but you're a great guy. And there was this really nice kind of camaraderie amongst all of the drivers, which is kind of to be applauded, really. They're not being mean to each other. I guess it's early in the season.
Magnussen.
Yeah. So, look... Now, we didn't see the big fight for the fastest lap point. Leclerc actually got it.
Yeah.
So he came away with 16 points because of that. But Bottas is still on top of the championship.
Yeah.
Because he came second, but he got that fastest lap point in Australia.
If he hadn't got that fastest lap point, Hamilton and him would be tying.
That's right. So there you go. So, you know, that fastest lap point could come into play for the whole season.
Oh, that's a pretty big prediction.
Well, no, I'm saying at other races, if it's going to be tight up the front, 1 or 2 points could make the difference, and let's hope it does. Frankly, let's hope that makes the difference. But what's really surprising, given the turn of speed the Ferraris have, Mercedes won 2 in the drivers' championship.
Yeah,
and then who?
In the drivers' championship, Mercedes won 2, but then almost. Half as much points away in third, Max Verstappen.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
And Bottas is almost double. How has almost double as much points as he has?
Let's hope that Ferrari gets some good results because it's like last year. They arguably had the better car a lot of the time, or some of the time. Not a lot of the time is probably unfair, but as good or a better car on a majority of races, you would say. Now, look, we've seen Australia where Mercedes had the speed. In Bahrain, the Ferraris were back on form. They had quarter of a second, 0.3 on top of the Mercedes. So I'm hoping that we see Ferrari and China being dominant again. And let's hope that Leclerc can get that victory, or at least Vettel up there as well. We don't want Mercedes to run away with it. I'd like to think Bottas is going to challenge Hamilton all season. I'm still not a Bottas believer. I know he did great in Australia, and I was really glad to see it. And I hope he can continue to challenge.
But it's still the first and second driver thing for him as well, though.
What do you mean?
I don't know at this point. They might give, they're equal drivers more or less. But in the end, Bottas is still the second driver. So they might give Hamilton a bit more priority, especially with them being this close in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, although Bottas is leading at the moment, so it's too early to make those calls. But Toto Wolff is never afraid of doing that. So anyway, I think China's going to be, I'm excited for it. It's a painful 2-week break. We're already a week through that break because... you and I have taken a while to record this for various reasons. Things like school and jobs.
And you having...
I will say one thing. Marcus Ericsson, he's in IndyCar. now, and IndyCar raced at Circuit of the Americas a week or so, just before, I think the week
Couple
before.
weeks ago, I
Yeah,
think.
the week before the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And it was a great race. It was really exciting. There was lots of talks about not observing track limits. The cars were going all over the place. And it was a pretty exciting week. Once again, if you're an Australian racing car driver supporter in willpower, he broke down. He was leading the race and he broke down.
Also-
so it wasn't a good
Also,
weekend.
guys, take it from my dad because I did not watch this race.
Yeah, that's true. But Marcus Ericsson goes, oh, look at how good the racing was with no DRS zones and what have you. But Bahrain was a cracker of a race, really exciting. And in large part, I'd say because of that extra DRS zone that they added, that made those turn 4 battles really exciting. Down the stop-start straight, the finish straight, the people would get close. Then there'd be another battle down through that turn 3 and 4 complex. So, you know, it's that DRS thing's hard to get right, but I reckon it was spot on in this race and made it really an enthralling race.
Yeah, okay, let's get on to predictions for China now. So, what do you
Go.
think? As we know, Ricciardo finished first in China.
A bit of luck, though,
2019.
right? There
Bit
was,
of luck, yeah, but he still finished first either way.
Because Verstappen was crashing into Vettel and Hamilton.
So we know that he's pretty good in China because I think he qualified well. I don't know the exact results, but he might have done better than 6th.
Sure. And it's a bit of a power circuit, right? It's got that massively long straight. Is that China?
Yeah, that
They got
is.
like a mile long
Massively
straight, I think?
long straight and then a couple turns and then another straight, which is still pretty long.
Yeah. So, look, I think Ferrari will have the pace advantage again over Mercedes.
I agree.
The thing that I think will be more interesting will be where Red Bull are. And this might really expose the Honda power unit. And and we might see the McLarens or the Renaults or the Hasses on their tail.
Personally, I think that at least one Renault and one McLaren will out-qualify. Well, not just Gasly.
You can't
Obviously,
say Gasly.
Gasly.
That's a given.
They both of them out-qualified Gasly in last week's race and Australia's race. But in China, I think maybe Verstappen as well. Because we have some talent. Like, Hulkenberg obviously has skills. Because he's been beating Ricciardo in qualifying sessions. And Ricciardo may not be the best
It's one each in quali at the moment.
Yeah,
for them.
like Ricciardo might not be the best qualifier. But still, Hulkenberg has the pace. Ricciardo more experienced, and he's been in better teams.
Car too. He's getting to grips with the car.
But I think once Ricciardo is in grips with the car, and then also Sainz and who's the other McLaren driver again? Norris.
Lando.
Norris especially. Norris and Ricciardo and Hulkenberg, I think both have a shot of out-qualifying Verstappen and Sainz too. Sainz has experience. He's been in 3 different teams in the last 3 years. Though.
I'd certainly love to see it. I'd love to see that Red Bull are getting challenged by the kind of best of the rest group, as long as that means everyone's edging closer to Mercedes and Ferrari.
And let's get this straight though. Verstappen still has heaps of skill, more so than the other drivers I just mentioned, probably.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Or most of them.
Yeah, certainly in quali.
Yeah. So he might be a tough challenge, but I think if they're like really good, I think they could out-qualify him.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see. Look, if Leclerc comes with the same kind of pace he had in Bahrain, I'd expect to see a Ferrari front row lockout again with Leclerc and Vettel at the front.
Okay, here are my top 5 or top 10. Why not? Top 10:
Yeah.
Leclerc, Vettel, Hamilton, Bottas, Ricciardo, Hulkenberg, Norris, Max, Sainz, and I don't know how many I've said. I think it's around 10.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Look, I think, it's going to be front row Ferrari, second row Mercedes, and then interesting, probably Verstappen, but Gasly will get out qualified again, I think, by McLarens or Renaults or Hasses. Yeah, and otherwise, I think it's going to, if it delivers, China normally delivers a great race. Bahrain was a great race. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really fascinating season, and Bahrain just revved me up for the whole season. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's the end of this podcast, but we're looking forward to China, and our next podcast should be recorded a couple days after China.
He's hoping, that's right.
I'm hoping.
Yeah. Look, if you're listening on iTunes or other platforms, make sure you give us a review. 5 stars would be lovely. And subscribe if you can. And thanks for listening. This has been Formula One and
Sun.